Hey guys, welcome to the 30-30 challenge. I am working with you guys. We're shooting for 30 minutes a week, 30 days in the month. We're just giving it a try. So if you are a parent, I've been pretty good at keeping these going. These are videos coming from the book Cornerstones, and really just a great way to teach your kids about theology. And so for some of you, I know you need a little bit of help doing that. And it's hard, kind of just trying to sit down and find a way to teach. But one of the things that we're doing still is in this section of Cornerstones, if you're watching these videos, we're in Genesis still. And right now we're in the sin section of the book of Cornerstones. And so now we're hitting Genesis 3 and on. And so there's a way for you to sit, and my hope is that you are going to read the Genesis story, talk a little bit more about that, read the verses, because the verses are powerful. The one thing to say about all of this is as you're doing this, like this is helpful, this is good stuff you want your kids to learn, but there's no substitute for just having the Word of God be read and let that just soak into your own lives. All right, so let's start with this. Here is the question, and it goes like this. Did Adam and Eve remain perfect, innocent, and content? Did Adam and Eve remain perfect, innocent, and content? Now, look, they were created for paradise, and really, the story is they were given one rule. One rule. That's it. Think about that. One rule. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In fact, if I were to throw open my text and to read it to you, you remember that's one of the first things that he's told that Satan does for them is in chapter 3, he gives them a direct look at that tree, and he's asking, are you really can't eat from any tree, can you? And really, he's trying to press on them that, no, hey, God's really trying to withhold a lot of stuff from you. Truth is, he's only withheld one thing. In fact, you'll see that in Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 and 17 says, you're free to eat from any tree of the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. From the day that you eat from it, you will certainly die. Now, some of your kids might push back and say, look, what's the big deal about eating a tree and from a tree? Now, here's the problem, okay? In this story, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we're not sure what it is. What that tree represents, though, is going from I'm going to now, when that choice happens, I am choosing for myself to know what is good and what is evil. Instead of letting God define what is right and wrong and how to live, I'm going to now choose for myself because I want to know. Now, so that's what's at the heart of this. We're not quite sure what that tree was. Some speculate it could have been, a pomegranate, because if you look at some of the temple imagery, and the temple is deeply connected to the garden, and there's a pomegranate imagery that's there. I don't know. But here's the deal. God gives them one rule. Eat from the abundance I've given you one. Just don't do this. There's a couple layers there. If you've got older kids, you probably want to think about that. I mean, ultimately, what's at the heart of the temptation that Satan gives her is that he says to this in verse 4, you will certainly not die, in chapter 3. In fact, God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good from evil. So Satan is essentially saying, guys, look, God's holding you back. You realize he doesn't want you to have fun. He doesn't want you to enjoy things. That's why he holds that tree back, because when you truly eat that tree, you will know and you will be like him. The truth is, God had already made people like him. They're made in his image. Were they willing to trust him that this was for their good? Were they willing to trust and let God interpret that for you? Or are you willing to go your own route? And so that's what we see here, right? This is the answer. So the answer to the question, right, is did they remain perfect and innocent, right? And the answer that we get is no, Adam and Eve disobeyed God's command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so you read that section in the story and you find that that's exactly what they did. It begins to look good. Notice what happens too as I read it to you. Let me show you, in the text. He says, the woman saw the food was good and delightful to look at, and it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. She took some of the fruit and she ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her. Adam was right next to her when this all went down. He let her be deceived. And then they ate it together. And their eyes of both of them were open. They knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So here's the deal. Once that took place, it was over. Now, you have to recognize, too, the action of taking fruit was already a result of what was taking place in their heart. What took place in their heart already was a rejection of what God wanted for them. And so they began to look at God as holding them back. They began to look at saying, I really want this, I want to desire. So there's a couple things I guess you can talk to your family about too, is think about this. So sin begins in the heart, right? That's important, that our actions are reflective about things that are already in our heart. It's from the outflowing of the heart, that's where we see, right? But we begin to see in this story too, that man is given only one rule, and yet he still blows that up. And so there's some people say, well, why would they do that? I know I wouldn't do it. But the truth is, I think part of that story is to show that, yes, you would. You would do that because they couldn't even do it. They couldn't even make it with one law, and we have many more that were given to us. I mean, even think if you tried to live by the 10 Commandments alone, none of us can even keep those. And so that's what we see here, is that man is so wicked, we can't do it. Notice what is said in the scriptures here. If you look at the book of Ecclesiastes 7:9, he goes, only see this, I have discovered that God made people upright, but they pursued many schemes. And this is, once again, reflective of the view of man that comes from the Bible, which is we were created for God to know him, but all of us have gone down a really weird road. We've all gone away. We want our own answers. We want to live for ourselves. We want to blaze our own trail. We don't want God. Romans 3 shows us that. And so I think if you've got older kids, you can press on this a little bit more and talk about, what's at the heart of why you want to sin or do what you want to do. And what it comes down to is oftentimes we may look at God as holding us back. We want to experience sin in the world around us because we feel like God somehow is the cosmic, fun sucker. But that's not what we see in scriptures. God has laid things out on purpose for our own good. And do we trust him? Do we let him do that? The other piece, if you want to go even deeper with this, is think about this. God gives one law, tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let God determine what is right and wrong for you. And we are now in a time and place where good and evil, right and wrong is determined by culture, by feeling, by emotion. There is no ultimate source anymore because we've gotten so far from the Bible. We've gotten so far from God. So there's a lot there. Now, once that happens, it's all over, and you begin to see in the story sin begin to infect all of creation, and everything will spiral out of control. So no, because they sinned, as we go back to this, Adam and Eve disobeyed God's command not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were not perfect anymore. Sin was there. They were not innocent anymore. They sinned against God. They were no longer content. They were no longer content because they went for that fruit. So there you go. Hope that's helpful. I'll have another one coming up pretty shortly. But talk to you guys later. I hope that helps kind of stem some good conversation.